Okay, I'm back, and I have connected all of my marks so that I have a grid, or not a grid, but lines going up and down my paper. So this time, instead of starting horizontal, we're keeping it this way, we're keeping it portrait. And I'm gonna locate the lowest line. I'm gonna take my T-square and line it up right along, keeping that stop right on the edge of my paper. I'm gonna line it up with, I'm gonna do the second line up, that's fine. And I'm gonna mark every inch again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Make sure these marks are big enough or long enough or whatever so that you can tell the difference between these tick marks and those. You don't want to get them confused. There we go. And be very careful to connect these perfectly. You do not want any of these lines to be crooked, and I have one here. If they are, fix them. Because otherwise your drawing is going to look terrible. Fix that one line that was a little crooked. There we go. Much better. So I have my tick marks here. I'm going to go in the middle and do the same thing. I'm going to pick one of these middle lines. Make a little mark every inch. Again, keeping my head directly over my ruler. Wherever I'm making the marks, keeping my head directly over top of it. We do this 3 times because we want that pivot point, that fulcrum point right in the middle. Now, one thing I do want to mention, don't ever spin the paper and continue. You always want to keep the paper the same orientation. You can flip it this way or this way. But don't ever flip the ruler, you know, like this and put it on the other side because then your measurements might get off. So you want to keep your ruler on the same side the whole time you do this. Sorry, I inhaled badly there. All right, so now we do the top marks. Again, making a mark every inch. And instead of a dot, I use a little hash line. Just easier for me to tell the difference. Okay, you can see right along that top line, I've made my little hash marks. I have it in the middle. I got one down there at the bottom too. So this time we're putting it again in the landscape position. Flip your ruler over so it's flat against the table. Find those first 3 marks. Line them up very, very carefully. Nope, that one slid. Hold the ruler down. I like to spread my fingers out so that they're wide on the ruler. And very gently, very lightly, connect my lines. Or you can even do this and put your arm against the ruler to help hold it, to keep it from sliding. I always get the first and the last dot connected, and then I double check and make sure my middle one is lined up as well. And you just keep going. Always double check to make sure you're lined up, and you just continue doing that. I'm gonna fast forward it so I'm to the end, but you should end up with a very even, nice 1-inch grid all over your paper. So you're going to continue this all the way up to the top of your page. Once you've done that, you're gonna be working on your sketchbook assignments, but I'm gonna show you what the next step is. You're gonna get your image printed out after you've uploaded it to that Google document. And mine just happens to be 16 inches by 16 inches. It's not gonna take up the whole page. It's gonna be printed on four to 6 different pieces of paper, just like you see here. So you're gonna align them so that they make the picture that you're doing, and then you're going to connect these 2 at a time. So I'm gonna take the bottom 2 here, and when you look at these up close, do you notice that this side has a little less white than this side? I call this the skinny edge, and I call this the fat edge. I'm going to cut the skinny edge and glue it to the fat. So I take my scissor and I get rid of this fat edge, just one side, don't do all 4, just one. Cutting this skinny edge that goes right up against the other side of the photo. So now this can overlap. See how that overlaps? So I'm gonna take my scrap piece of paper And my fat edge, I'm gonna coat with glue. And I wanna place it on top of my scrap paper because I don't wanna get tons of glue on the table, which will get glue on the back of your pieces, which will make it all nasty. So I put a nice little coating of glue. Then I take it off of my scrap paper, lay it back down, and very carefully, very slowly, very delicately line up your papers. These have to be accurate or your lines are going to be off. Now, pat, just pat it. Don't rub because that's going to rub the ink. If you want to, you can put your scrap paper on top and rub on that. Don't rub on the image itself. Make sure that you've pressed it down nicely. It's nice and secure, and it should be secured together. Now what I can do is I can put a little piece of tape here, but if you glued it well, it should be okay. So I'm gonna set those two aside. We're gonna look at these two. So out of these two, you can look at them up close. Again, this side is just slightly skinnier. So I'm going to cut the skinny, glue to the fat. Cutting this side, and be very accurate with these cuts, y'all. Right up against the dark part, making sure you get rid of the white. Be as accurate as possible. Cut that little sliver off. Put glue on this side. Make sure you got enough glue. But try very hard not to get any excess glue on the ink part of the printout. Move my scrap piece of paper. I gotta be so careful with this. I gotta make sure the lips are lined up, the nose is lined up, the head is lined up, the flowers or everything has to be lined up. That looks pretty good. Again, don't rub, pat it, or put your scrap piece of paper on top and rub with that. Secure it, make sure it's good and sealed. There we go. Now, I have these two pieces. I need to connect these two pieces together. The same thing. This one is slightly skinnier than this one. So I'm gonna cut this long strip off. Don't be the person that cuts all the sides off of the drawing. Somebody does it all the time. Don't do it. Don't let it be you. You're just doing one of these at a time. Again, cutting just the white off, right up against that black edge. We don't want any white gaps. We don't want to cut off any of the black if we can help it. All right, cut that off. I'm gonna do the same thing we did before, just on a larger scale. Gluing. I always move my glue back and forth a few times. I find just rolling it over there once isn't quite enough. I keep picking up these little bits of glue. I don't want big gooey globs, just enough on there to hold it. I gotta make sure this lines up perfectly. Neck. Oh, I missed a little white piece there. That's okay. I'm not perfect, but I did the best I could. All right, that looks pretty decent. I'm just tapping it down and taking my paper and then I'm rubbing. Making sure I get a nice seal. So you can see how you see these little like bits of white. That just means I didn't quite line up, but that's okay. That's gonna be in the dark part of my picture anyway. So I'm not that worried. Now you can choose to cut the white off. I'm not gonna cut the whole white border off because I want some place for my tape to stick to, but I got this big old piece of white hanging off the end, so I'm just getting rid of that. Just to make it a little bit more manageable. There we go. Now I'm going to show you how you can transfer this. One sec.